Hello everyone and welcome to the Pancake Parlay episode 90. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I am doing really great. Today we're going to be talking about some news, obviously with, a lot of Jedi stuff, a lot of Star Wars stuff, because that's what we always do most of the time. We're going to be talking about some finales with Arrow and, and just kind of, and seeing that Harley Quinn animated TV show. We haven't talked about it. We've kind of briefly talked about it and kind of seeing if we like it or not, what's going on with it. But first, we're going to be talking about some news. Basically some meme news, I would say. And the news broke pretty much today that Netflix will be doing a live-action adaptation of the anime One Piece. And that has a lot of baggage. Let's just say that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the last time, Netflix did a live-action version of an anime. I know you like the Death Note.
It's a different beast, I'll say.
Doesn't? Yeah. Yeah. And look, it wasn't. Look, honestly, it doesn't look that great. And a lot of people who kind of like the anime didn't like it. But the thing is, they've also got in their wheelhouse, they're making, Cowboy Bebop as well, and now they're doing One Piece. Like Cowboy Bebop, I can understand, right? Like,
yeah, it would just kind of be like a leader type of thing. So long as they get the setting right, and the look of it kind of right. My whole thing with the Cowboy Bebop thing is like mostly the hair. The hair is always the hardest part, where it's like you need to get the hair right. Even just as a side tangent to Cowboy Bebop. There was a recent interview with I think his name, John Cho, the guy who's going to be playing Spike. He had a recent interview, and it looks like he has longer hair and it's kind of semi like curly and fuzzy. So I feel like that's kind of the hair they're going to go with when doing the movie. But with One Piece, obviously I think it's well known that I've said it probably many times. I have not watched it. Like I've watched episodes of it when it was on TV at some point, but I haven't actively watched all 900 plus episodes of this show. But I do know that this would be one of those things where adaptation will be quite hard. Just because it does have a lot of, I guess, anime tropes and things that would not translate too well into live action form.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is that it'll probably have the problem with what like a lot of like animation to live action, movies kind of have a big problem with, and that's getting the CG right in order to kind of capture the same feel, right? Like, what it reminds me of is, remember Dragon Ball Evolution?
Yes, I do.
That was an awful movie, and a lot of the budget, that kind of went to doing some of like the CGI for it. Like the Kamehameha kind of looked cool, but like, God, like the way they got to it.
They only did it like
right?
one time, basically.
One time, it's like their whole entire budget went into that. Meanwhile, they hired like Jim Carrey as the mask to play Piccolo. Like this is what I'm saying. Like my problem is like obviously Netflix has said that they're interested in, or that they are going to be spending 17 billion, I believe, on content for Netflix. So they're clearly kind of putting a lot of money into the sphere, and this is probably going to be one of it, but I'm not confident that it's going to look good.
Well, it'd be hard because like first of all, when it comes to manga and anime, they do have different distinct styles in art and how it looks. So the characters look the way they kind of do. So it's pretty much near impossible to do it in a live action form unless there's heavy CGI on every single character. Or be one of those weird, creepy people who do the cosplay sometimes, where they get those makeup and they go to the extreme of the makeup, where they they have the shaders and lines. So we've got that problem. We've also got many problems of how the powers work, because I know Luffy has like extendo, elasto like limbs. I do know that, like,
Mr. Fantastic Arms.
Yeah, fantastic. You got that. You've got like other, I guess, characters who have different abilities, and some would be easy to translate, some won't be. So I think it just depends on what they're doing with content,
Also,
I guess.
the problem is like, is it going to be like in a typical Netflix format, like in the sense that they're going to be dedicating a couple of, like, because anime usually like kind of goes on for several episodes per arc, but are we going to get like one episode for when Luffy meets the guy in the first episode, and are we going to get a flashback to him leaving his island, and is it going to be one episode dedicated to Buggy the Clown, or is it going to be like the Arlong arc, which is like kind of the more famous arc where he fights like a fishman, right? Like a merman, fishman, something like that. Is it going to be like that? Like, is it going to be an 8-episode arc regarding that? Like, I don't know. Like, that's what I'm kind of, because like, anime, especially One Piece, is huge, like still ongoing. I'm behind currently in watching the show, right? It just seems like a really fruitless effort, especially since it's going to most likely be half-assed. But that's just, my general opinion of how Netflix. There's a reason why there was, the meme going around when they make like a Netflix version of something, and how it looks really like
versus the adaptation.
Yeah, the adaptations, right? And they look, and like the Netflix one looks really bootleg. That's what that's what I'm going to expect coming out of it. I don't have a lot of high hopes for the other show that we mentioned either. That's supposed to be coming out.
Well, even with a problem, I guess, with a lot of this stuff is with animation, you can kind of obviously make a scene and kind of what do you call it? Like make scenery and kind of have the world kind of really feel lived in because it's just drawings. So like something like that's why I feel like Alita Battle Angel did a really good job of that. But it only showed certain segments of things and kind of obviously very heavy CGI. So like for example, with Cowboy Bebop, they kind of basically have to do the same. Have some things that are very kind of run down almost, and then also with I think the problem with One Piece is since they're pirates and they'll be on ships, they're gonna basically CGI more or less all of that or do it physically. And I don't know if you remember like the Pirates of the Caribbean films, for example. Those films, I think even like at World's End is like it cost them to make it cost them $300 million to make that movie.
Right.
With building the sets of the ships. So even to begin with, if they're gonna do some ship battles or do whatever it is on those ships, it's gonna cost them a hell of a lot of money on top of whatever CGI thing that they're doing. So it's gonna be
it's going to be that, and then at the same time, the costumes and stuff for the characters are going to look awful as well. Like there's so many times I've seen what the live action version of something looks like, and there'll be a cosplayer that's able to make something that seems practical, and at least maybe they can't do necessarily like full action scenes in it, but they could at least do like on-person kind of fights or filming for, right? I see all the time with cosplayers making things like that. We won't be able to see that in this live action because they'll have to make it really simplistic so that it's easy to replicate, and that's ultimately the big shame. But,
I know. Are the designs in One Piece that bad? Because I only really know a little bit of the main cast, and majority of them, like, for example, Luffy's relatively easy. Sanji seems to be like I don't know, relatively okay.
So like the kind of more human characters would kind of be pretty easy to do, but once you kind of introduce like Chopper, who's like the reindeer, how are you going to introduce that other than the fact that he'd be all CG? Like if they get to that stage, right? Which I doubt they will. But then there's also the half robot man, and the walking and skeleton. Like those are going to be pretty difficult to kind of do without CG. But if you're going to do them in a kind of cosplay-esque fashion, like I guess you could. But yeah, I don't know. It's like I'm not very confident in how this will be. Once again, it just seems like one of those things where like Netflix has like, hey, what's something that people like? Oh, anime. All right, what's an anime? And then they just like have like a dartboard and they
the thing with Netflix is that they're actively in the anime game. I guess I think they've seen kind of like what other studios are doing, and I feel like Netflix is kind of in that space of like trying to compete with like Crunchyroll and like even Amazon, because there's stuff like that are just releasing on Netflix. I think Violet Evergarden and Carol and Tuesday, they have this simultaneous
simulcast,
simulcast for the episodes. So I feel like I think there's like some sort of team in there somewhere where they're just know their stuff.
But animation is different to live action, and that's the problem. Like when you can hire a South Korean studio or a Japanese studio and make your animated stuff there, like that's not going to be like too much of a big deal. Yeah, they're going to be trying to compete with Crunchyroll and their ilk, but when we're talking about live action, it's like a totally different beast. Like even people within even live action anime movies in Japan don't do that well, right? Like there was that Attack on Titan live action that apparently was really I didn't watch it, but I was like, oh, it's a cool idea. Like, could do some pretty interesting stuff, and also have like, because it could also be, like Attack on Titan is one of those shows that you can kind of make it so that it's not with necessarily Japanese people either, right? Yeah. Because it has that Germanic kind of background to it. But yeah, like it's one of the. I'm not confident. It's not going to be good. That's my prediction. My hot take is I don't even think it's that hot. I think
to be honest, I don't think it'll even come out. I'm going to think it's going to be development hell and then never come out.
Never come out.
I'm betting on that. I think it's all really dependent on how the Cowboy Bebop reception goes. I think, and then they'll be like, oh wait, that cost us a lot of money. It didn't deliver, so then let's just kind of cancel this project. I think that's what's going to happen.
But it's a shame because once again, it's them. It's a bunch of studio executives. Not that I really necessarily trust people who are like fans to necessarily know what the best anime or best thing to adapt, but like once again, like you have somebody like Kevin Feige is like a great example of somebody who loves comics, but he's also a business savvy person, so he can kind of put the calculations together and think like, okay, we're going to do this because I know that this has an established fan base, or this can be adapted well, or this can look good, right? Like, there isn't something so far in the Marvel formula where you're just like, yeah, that doesn't seem like a good idea. Like, everything seems to be pretty much like, okay, this is in line with what they have the capability of doing, and the capability of coming out and doing well. I don't think Netflix, and let alone anyone, good of a live action anime adaptation, other than like when we were starting up before we started the podcast, but there was that like live action Death Note, and then there was also the one that came to mind, the Bleach movie. That's the one that just came to mind. Then that's a Netflix. You see, that's the problem. It's like it's a movie that.
And then there's a Full Metal Alchemist one, which is kind of like
I haven't seen it. Is it any good?
I think it cuts obviously quite a lot of stuff to 50 episodes into like an hour and 40 minutes, but I think it kind of does this job. But it's like if you want to watch the story, you watch the anime or read the manga type of thing over.
To be honest, I kind of find that like even in the anime, I kind of find that there's a lot of stuff that could be like, yeah, this doesn't seem that necessary. So I can kind of understand that. But yeah, like like think about it. Like the Bleach movie was pretty good, and I think that movie wasn't made by Netflix, but it was distributed.
Yeah, it was distributed by Netflix, right? and it's
still, it was actually made by Warner Brothers, so that's really cool.
Yeah, and then Warner Brothers, they had the license to Akira, so, but still, yeah, just don't do that ever.
Man, now I want a sequel to that Bleach. That'll be dope.
Well, that's the thing. They really adapted like an arc or two.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is how you do an adaptation into a movie. I guess is just do each movie as an arc, and you don't have to cram everything in there.
Yeah, but I trust Warner Brothers. I don't trust.
Definitely Netflix.
That's a problem here. But yeah, I guess speaking to more mega corporations, we don't trust doing things properly. Although we do love Google, but their Stadia platform has kind of gone like a little bit radio silent, at least according to like all the fans. So there was a post I saw online that someone mentioned that it's almost been like 70 days since since Stadia's been released, and it's been over 40 days since there's been a new game announcement or release, or a new feature that's been updated, or any kind of like community update. And And yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of like, hey, like, what's going on? There's still no word about like the 4K on browser functionality. Pixel seems to be the only way that you can use the only kind of phone that you can use to play the game. Like you can't use it on like an iOS phone, which makes sense. They want to kind of
they
work in
optimize it the best on their own
yeah,
platforms.
yeah. But like, there's no news about trying to expand it to something else. Family sharing, that's pretty like standard now. Steam obviously introduced that, which was really cool. Although I don't use that, but I still appreciate it as a function. Um, but like, yeah, like Google have said, like, hey, they said that they have 120 games that are going to be coming out, but I don't know when are they when are they coming out? Or going
Yeah,
to be games from like 2 or 3 years ago or 5 years ago or whatever. Like,
yeah. I don't know, because I feel like Google's relatively good in general, like as a service type of thing,
hmm,
but they're never that good when it comes to actually having a final physical product. Like everyone always talks about, like things like Google Glass, or even I guess they have their like their version of Alexa or whatever it is. But I don't know. I feel like Google, when they usually do this type of stuff, and they're doing experiments almost, and it feels like every single product, even if it's retail, it's still an experiment to them, and if it doesn't work, they'll just kind of can it.
yeah,
So
yeah, Google.
that's kind of the worry that people would have, where it's like it had all these promises, and it didn't deliver the promises, and everyone's still wondering, okay, where's the next update type of thing. It's kind of like when the controversies where people they donate to people on Patreon, and they say, oh, the Kickstarter, where like, oh, we're gonna do this, we'll do that, and they never do it.
Mhm.
Because this, like, that stuff kind of stuff happens. So I feel like maybe Google's in the same position where they're kind of like, yeah, it's not worth our resources to follow suit on this. And I think it's like someone out there was probably like, they're just like, gaming's the new frontier, let's try to get onto this. And maybe they're still gonna, they're revamping everything, because obviously next gen consoles are going to be coming out sometime this year, probably at the end of the year, and we're going to learn more about them. And I think having something like an online streaming service, much like a Stadia, is in Sony's and Microsoft's kind of wheelhouse for what's happening. So I feel like,
Well, I
and
mean,
then it loses, and then at that point, Google Stadia loses any kind of advantage at all that it kind of currently had.
I think you hit the nail on the head just then. Like, not even Sony. Sony's not really doing anything in their kind of online. Well, at least they haven't announced anything as of yet, right? So I mean, I'm not going to speculate whether they are or aren't, but at this stage, there's no evidence to suggest they are doing anything in cloud streaming. But I think like that's obviously going to be an area that all these companies want to kind of investigate and invest in the future. But I think Project X Cloud, which is Microsoft's cloud streaming service feature, is basically everything that Stadia claims to be, right? And it's doing a better job at it with like exclusive games and stuff. So I think like Microsoft is doing well in that department, and if they continue to do well, like again, I think I mentioned it before that like yeah, it kind of seems like Stadia is like one of those things like, who is this for? Um, it's not for the hardcore gamers because it has like these latency issues. It's not for the casual gamers necessarily because you just have all these expensive niche games on it.
I guess
So
the only person who would be somewhat remotely for is the people who like tech gadgets, but at that point they're probably into gaming anyways. So it's kind of like I think the other people who like it are just like, oh, like I don't want any clutter, and I just want one box to stream everything. But even then, you don't get everything, so it's like, I don't know.
yeah, but are you really gonna get that much money from this kind of market? That's the thing. Like they like these kind of streaming services need to kind of be like the video game version of Netflix, right? Like that's what I think that these things have to eventually be. That's what they're going to be turning into eventually. Where like somebody, one of these companies are going to be getting these indie companies or a AAA company to release a game exclusively on their platform on their streaming service. And they're going to have exclusivity rights for this game on their platform. Like that's what I reckon will happen. And you have to pay $20 a month or whatever, like 15. Let's say 15, right? Let's say 15. 15 a month to play this game or play all these games on this platform, and you have a plethora of them. They kind of rotate in and out. And I think like that's going to probably be the more healthier way to do it. But the problem is obviously, are we going to be able to have games that we own anymore in the future? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the dangerous future that we'll be living in.
Yeah, I mean, look, even technically on Steam, you don't own it, right? And I'm technically fine. I'm personally technically fine with that. But yeah, at the same time, there are a lot of people who like the physical stuff. But I think companies will be able to allow that, and I don't see websites and like website gaming repositories like GOG going away. And being able to play games DRM free will probably still be a thing. And if it isn't, like people will be able to find offline quote-unquote version of games after a while regardless. But yeah, I think ultimately Stadia seems to be going towards a direction, like more towards of a lose rather than a win for Google. And like you said, there's plenty of projects that Google has been kind of canceling. Like even Google Hangouts will officially be closing in December of this year, so December 2020.
Yeah,
so
they've got that, and
up.
they even got apparently they're restricting a lot of things that will be on YouTube. So I feel like the branch of Google, and then as well as like things like YouTube and things like that, they're very they're seeing stuff, and maybe they're just like, oh, the only profit that we really have is just purely based on shares in the market, so we need to have something out there that actually is a physical sell and be profitable. So I feel like that's probably what they're thinking and where they're kind of going for.
Yeah, and look, like having games that kind of ubiquitous within like an ecosystem is probably going to be the direction that most places will be. Like everybody wants to kind of be like Nintendo, right? Where they have their strong IPs, but they also have access to all the other games that are available. It's currently the situation with Switch, where you can only play Zelda, Mario, and like Metroid and stuff on Switch, but then you also have access to The Witcher. But slowly, a lot of companies are kind of figuring out, hey, let's like kind of expand and catch more of a market like outside of the traditional console gaming market, because I think they're kind of realizing everything as it is, and because of such, they're going to have to stretch their hand out, and we've already seen that with Xbox and Microsoft recently allowing for the Halo games to be on Steam, right? Mm-hmm. And now there was recent news about Horizon Zero Dawn, which was originally a PS4 exclusive game, is apparently being ported to PC as well. And I'm pretty happy, because that just means I don't need to get a PS4 to play like apparently one of the best games on PS4. I think it's like there's this game, there's Spider-Man, and then there's God of War. Those are like the big games that I've heard that are like some of the best from like the last console generation on the PS4. Like sans like I think the Metal Gear Solid game and
a lot of there were more multi-platforms these days, and even stuff like what was originally exclusive, stuff like the Yakuza series was announced that all the new Yakuza games will be on Xbox. Same with all the Kingdom Hearts games as well. So there's kind of a lot. I guess if you're not like a first party platform, you're gonna get locked down on the consoles. But now I feel like everyone's kind of seeing, obviously, there's what Microsoft has been doing in the past like 5 or 6 years, where it's like it's getting on PC, and everyone's like, oh, it's not really an exclusive, but still like the profits of the game in and of itself still go to the studio and still go to Microsoft. So it's kind of like a new potential branch of money, and I feel like I think this is the new way of looking at all this type of stuff, especially with the next generation of consoles or whatever it may be, where it's going to blur the lines of generations. But on top of that, it's going to, as mentioned, with kind of like a thing like Stadia, it won't be about the box per se. It's just going to be
the box is irrelevant.
Yeah, the box is irrelevant. It's going to be the streaming service, and it's going to be like what games you can play, and then because you'll still get revenue streams off there. So, and even then, most consoles are sold at a loss. They're pretty much all sold at a loss, anyways. So, as a factor of looking at money and profiting, and getting your name out there, it's probably best that you don't even have a box.
But that's what I'm saying, right? It'd be interesting to see like how it manifests, like with something like, I guess it's kind of like a wait and see thing at this stage because you look at something like Netflix, Amazon, HBO, all these, Disney Plus, all of these, basically like online, services for entertainment, for TV entertainment or traditional TV entertainment. They've been pouring in millions of dollars to develop new TV shows on their platform to try and get people to watch shows on their platforms, right? Um, and the thing is, usually when it comes to making a TV show, like, maybe it'll take like a year and a bit, or a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years to come up with a show, and therefore its subsequent sequel, right? And then you can kind of have a cycle, like a reliable cycle, where something like Stranger Things. Stranger Things came out, and then a year later, season 2 came out. I guess like more than a year after then season 3 came out. But it'd be interesting to see how they do something like that for something like video games. Like how are they going to keep people coming to video games? Will it just be that they will just license random video games that and producers and development, or are they going to have in-game development with, like, obviously we've seen Microsoft has already been doing that, snatching up a bunch of different like indie studios and AAA studios to try and bolster their own ranks. And I think part of that is in preparation for a streaming platform or a video game streaming platform, like something through xCloud, and its ilk, right? So is it going to function like that? Whereas like they're going to give like a studio, let's say, Double Fine's new game that comes out, on its first year, and then 2 years later, like they're gonna, and then after they release that game, then they're in this 2-year development cycle, where they have to make another game, and hope it doesn't get delayed so they can release it on the streaming platform. You know what I mean? I feel like a video game takes far longer to make than something like a TV show or a 10-episode TV show. You know what
Not
I
only
mean?
that, but it's just the price of them are pretty like absorbent, because
Mm,
because
exactly.
if you look
That's
at
what I
if
mean.
yeah it that's why video games are harder and harder to make, and that's why
Hmm.
you kind of see like indie development almost like there's indies like really small ones, and then there's kind of like middling studios but are still seen as indie, and I feel like that's where we're currently at the moment, and that's why like you do get Microsoft kind of eating up and buying a lot of studios that they're kind of middling. Like they won't sell like Call of Duty numbers, but they sell relatively well. Like the studio that was behind Hellblade, and Heavenly Sword and all that stuff. I forgot the exact name of that studio. Ninja Theory. They got
Hmm.
bought out by Microsoft because I think majority of their games they sell, but they don't sell like well enough for them to
Gangbusters.
and especially to make the games that they want to make. So it's like they need that extra bit of money or
Hmm.
kind of ownership just to make what they need to make.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, it's going to be an experiment at this stage. Like, it took a while for, all these companies to kind of realize, hey, we can actually make a TV show set in like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? It kind of took them like, like Game of Thrones and, all the shows that came before it, where they, like, these 10-episode series kind of showed like, oh, hey, this can be a viable format where we can pour a lot of money into one show and get a lot of people kind of watching it, right?
Mm.
Whether or not they can do the same thing with a streaming platform for video games, that's going to be the next big thing. But yeah, that's the case with Horizon Zero Dawn. Cool, that's going to be people on PC can play it because that means I can play it without purchasing a PS4, so I'm happy. So yeah, so there's that. Another game that's also in its rumor to come out on PC, or well, just, and I guess in general everywhere, is a remake of Knights of the Old Republic. There was a lot of kind of leaks that came out in regards to it, and at this stage it's not completely known whether it's going to be a remake or a reimagining or a spiritual sequel to the original Knights of the Old Republic. But I think the main thing is that it's going to at least borrow a lot from it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I feel like because the base structure of what KOTOR is, is already been established. So the real question, yeah, is become semi-remake or reimagining or like new content completely, where they put in, whatever Disney wants to do, because like technically KOTOR isn't canon as far as I know. The games aren't canon. I don't think. I think they kind of scrubbed it off. I'm like, yeah, because they want to start like new or whatever.
Well, actually, as of recent, there was a let me see if I can find it really quickly. But essentially, Disney released, like, I don't know if you remember, like, back when you were a kid, there were these like kind of Star Wars omnibuses, and in it, like, they'd show like all these kind of tools and not necessarily tools, but like guns and people from the Star Wars universe. And it'd show you like in detail about oh, this is Boba Fett's gun, and this is where the fuel injector goes, and this is where the so and so goes.
Yeah, I think they're called visual dictionaries. I do have those books in my house.
Oh, do you? Which one do you have?
I've got all of them. I got four. I got the original trilogy one, which is kind of like a semi-one book, and then I got 1, 2, 3, and yeah, they're these books where they're kind of like,
this is
this character. I think so, yeah. And they have the character, and then they talk about where the character comes from, a little bit of backstory on, and then like it'll like break down like, oh yeah, this lightsaber's made from this, and this gun part happens from there. So yeah, it gives you a very descriptive detail that obviously you wouldn't get in a movie, but like if you're like someone who likes lore and kind of like all that nitty-gritty detail, it'll have it on there.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a shame, because they should try and, well, I guess with the new movie, it's a bit of a shame that they don't kind of put a lot more detail in that they probably could have, because I've heard a lot of like interesting things that about like certain characters, like the Knights of Ren. Oh, they all have names, they all have unique stuff, but you don't get that in any of the movies. But anyways, in like you said, the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, which I think technically came out last year, it actually says that they make Darth Revan, who is kind of like a main focus in the KOTOR games, without giving too much away. And yeah, essentially in it, it talks about how certain I think they are kind of like Sith troopers, right? Like they're like platoons, so to speak, like of Sith troopers that kind of work under whoever's the Sith master at the time, right? And they talk about how Emperor Palpatine has his Sith troopers, in the form of like the Final Order and stuff like that. But in it, they also reference and they mention that, and I quote, from this article that I'm reading from Green Rant, each legion was named after their ancient Sith lord, one of them being the third, the Revan Legion. So it can, at least through this visual, dictionary, as you mentioned, they do confirm that Revan exists. But the game is the first kind of official introduction to it. But this kind of confirms that Revan's canon. But maybe this is another way that if they are making a remake of the game in some capacity, it could be how they reintroduce old canon as mainline canon, and maybe set up stuff for the new movies that may or may not be coming out.
Movies, TV, any other media, because I'm assuming that's kind of the general direction that they've been going, where it's like, this book is related to this type of thing, so it's kind of like everything's kind of related to what they're kind of doing. My real question for all of this is that the original games were made by Obsidian Entertainment, who are now under Microsoft. And obviously EA has the license to Star Wars. So the real question, who is making this game? And like that, and I think that's the real question, who is making this game. I think the obvious bet would probably be Respawn Entertainment, because I
thought BioWare made Knights of the
Old Republic. Was it? Oh, it was BioWare.
I believe it's BioWare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe BioWare finally can be like, hey,
remake it, yeah.
Hey guys, I'm sorry about Mass Effect Andromeda, and I'm sorry about Anthem, but here's a game that you all love, but like, let's hope they don't like get their modern sensibilities and shove it in the game and make it bad.
Well, look, especially given their track record recently, but I guess that's, doing something as simple as a remake would be a good faith way to kind of get back into the good books of quote unquote gamers who kind of see BioWare as like a shell of their former selves, right? But yeah, like it's one potential. Who knows? If it's even true, right? And to be fair, you can just kind of play the old Knights of the Old Republic game. And the thing is, my only problem is I don't know how well it would do in the modern climate, because Knights of the Old Republic is it's a turn-based kind of RPG, but it's like an active time kind of game. And there are games. Maybe if they made it like a remake, like Final Fantasy VII, like that would be pretty dope. Where it's like there is some turn-based elements, but you also do kind of like actively are involved in the combat too. Like that would be pretty cool if they do make it like that. I doubt it. That's obviously going to be hella expensive to do. But in terms of like how it's going to appeal to the modern, because I played that game and like I like games like that. I like RPGs. I like the older kind of RPG style of games. So it doesn't bother me. But whether newer people would enjoy games like that, I'm not too sure. So that's my only concern. If they do make a remake, is they'd probably have to change up like some of the combat mechanic, not necessarily the dialogue stuff. The dialogue stuff's perfect as it is. Like maybe a bit of an update here and there. Maybe they can add some new lore stuff, but other than that, like I'd be interested to see if they end up updating stuff in regards to the video game. But yeah, speaking of other Star Wars news, we talked about it a little bit but we mentioned how the Obi-Wan series was like rumored to be cancelled. It wasn't like official. There's a lot of like talks and speculation about it, but since our last recording, they have basically confirmed that the crew that was working on the Obi-Wan Disney series have been released from their contracts, sent home, so to speak, which is kind of like a really nice way of saying that they've been like not fired, because I think
it's
fired
basically
is kind of like,
it's not like fired, because I think fired kind of it like encapsulates like the job is still around but you're gone. This is basically being like, the job that we thought we had lined up for you does not exist, therefore meaning you do not have a job. None of us have a job.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly, right. It's not like necessarily the people who were let go did anything wrong. It was more like, oh, we were going to do something, but we're no longer doing it, and therefore, or what we're doing has been pushed back. Therefore, you guys have been, released from your contract.
Because they're not going to pay you for literally do like nothing for 6 months.
Sit around and do nothing, exactly. Yeah. It's insane. Like I don't know what's going on.
I think the common thing is fire Kathleen Kennedy. I think everyone's been for saying that for about 2 to 4 years, but I think it's like 100% one of those things now where it's like, okay, clearly like we can see where kind of the gravy train kind of stops, and this is the time to do it, because everyone's kind of picking up everything where when they first announced it at like D23 or whatever it was, or Star Wars Celebration, Kathleen Kennedy was like, yeah, we love the scripts are all done, we're ready to shoot. And then now what the rumors are saying is like, oh yeah, there's too much similarities to The Mandalorian, and they need to rework the scripts. So it's like, it's almost like that was face, that was like talking to get fans happy, but now since like, it just seems to be some sort of semi-disaster. My real question is, even if it's very similar to Mandalorian, isn't that a good thing? Because Mandalorian's good. And not only that, but then if you look at the past track record of the past 3 main Star Wars films, you can see a lot of it is a retread of older films. So it's kind of like, I don't know why that it's a problem now. But, Mandalorian's a good thing.
Well, yeah, like the screenwriter is Hussein Amini. So he wrote Drive, right? And yeah, he's the one who kind of came up with the script initially, and reading from Collider, it apparently, the rumors potential trouble behind the scenes, and essentially, like you mentioned, and like we talked about, because this was all kind of initially when we were talking about it, like, oh, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, who knows, like, maybe give it some time, maybe more news will come out, but it was confirmed, and like was what some of the rumors said, producer Kathleen Kennedy was not happy with the scripts. Sources tell us that what will most likely happen next is the scripts will be reworked, and hopefully the goal of reassembling this summer but there's always a possibility that that time frame could shift. Like they're just going to keep pushing it back and pushing it back till they can come up with something. Like, oh man, like it's ridiculous. Like, what the situation is, and like according, there was confirmation that Lucasfilm was essentially looking for a new writer to replace Ameni, and yeah, like that's the current situation. And the thing is, like, it scaled back from a 6-episode series to a 4-episode series. I'm just thinking, 4 episodes. Like, what are you going to tell us in 4 episodes? Like, I get it. Like, I get that. Like, things don't need to be as long or as a 10-episode series if they don't have to be. But like, is it going to be that epic of a show?
Like, yeah, and I think like some of it's probably budgeting, and even then it also really comes back down to like what story you're actually trying to tell. Like, what is the main like type of thing? And obviously it's placed between 3 and 4, and that's kind of generally a big gap, and that's what we kind of want to learn. But the real question is, what story were you going to tell? And it's just like at that point it just feels like this is what fans want. They want the Obi-Wan thing, so they bring McGregor back and everything like that, but then they're just like, wait a second, we don't have a story, even though people wanted this, but we don't have a story. And I feel like they just did it because fans wanted it, which is true, but the real question is they don't have an intent.
They have no idea what they're doing.
They don't have an intent for it. They literally just be like,
let's
just make it because make people happy.
Yeah, and I mean, at the same time, it could very much well be like, this is just cancelled, and they're just saying like, oh yeah, no, it's still coming, guys, wait around. Subscribe to Disney Plus, please. Please have confidence in our streaming platform.
Well, that's the real question. Disney Plus really doesn't have anything going on for a bit, like currently now, because we've talked about how they're losing subscribers after The Mandalorian, and they do have maybe a few things coming up, and I think obviously, for example, most of the, I guess they'll get some animated stuff in there, and that's clearly the main draw at the moment. Because like I honestly feel like even just the TV stuff, like I 100% know at some point, maybe this year, they'll be like that. Remember that show Gargoyles is going to come back? Like they'll do something like that. But
Allegedly,
but it probably will be. But like stuff when it comes to Star Wars, aside from Clone Wars, it's kind of really it. Like there's.
Well, I think in terms of Star Wars, there isn't that much coming along the pipeline, because I think like everything's kind of in flux in terms of what's going on. But like they do have a few other shows coming out. Obviously in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think that's essentially it. Like they might have to try and get Feige to help him out, because another news article that came out on Forbes by Scott Mendelson, pretty big kind of like contributor to like all the Hollywood and entertainment news, but his article basically says Star Wars: Rise of Skywalker is the first $500 million disappointment, and the thing is, I think that's pretty accurate, right? Like in terms of a movie that was kind of hyped out to be for people who love The Last Jedi and love The Force Unleashed or whatever, like this was this movie was supposed to be the one that wrapped it up, and it made the least money out of all these movies, right? And if you compare it to something like the Avengers, right, and all these other Marvel, every single one of these movies that have been coming up in the line of like leading up to the final Avengers movie has been making more and more money. What is it? Infinity War made heaps of money, and then Endgame made even more money, right? And
it's like the trend should be upwards, not downwards.
Downwards, exactly. In terms of like people's kind of not only interest but also confidence in a brand being good. And I think like especially since it came out during Christmas, like you'd expect them to do.
Yeah, like Star Wars would be like the thing that would last like 2 months, 3 months in the cinemas, always number one, and it really got beat after like 4 or 5 weeks, which is literally just like I would say that generally happens for most for some properties, I would say, but even then not many. But the real question is like it's Star Wars. Like it's one of those things where but I think I've read articles where it's like Star Wars was the golden goose, and Lucasfilm, basically the new Lucasfilm and whoever people in charge have literally killed the golden goose. Having a Star Wars film would automatically grant you $1 billion, which so far track records have been good, minus Solo, of course. And that's kind of where the kind of the stumble was. We're like, oh, okay, you can't just randomly throw something Star Wars out there and just expect $1 billion. And I feel like we expect quality as well. So that and not only that, but this is I'd say the not even a spin-off, they're the main trilogy of films. Like it's going to be talked about within the same, you know, talking points of as like Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith type of thing. It's all going to be in that wheelhouse, and I don't think I've really seen such a disappointment like this when it comes to the box office. And I think like it's very vocal, and I think Disney knows this and Lucasfilms knows this, and that's why they must be doing something really behind the scenes to figure out what they're actually doing. Because yeah, to have something that, yeah, it made profit, but how much profit did it actually make, and was it even worth it?
Yeah, like, I mean, and personally, I don't think the direction and how they went with the movie ended up kind of working in Disney's favor in the end. And subsequently, this is what we're kind of seeing with the quality of Star Wars at the moment. But yeah, like, they need somebody who can figure out, you know, the direction for where Star Wars goes moving forward. And I think that's why, like, they need somebody like Dave Filoni or you know, Jon Favreau or Kevin Feige to come in and be like, hey, like, you know, even Kevin Feige just coming in and just being like, hey, I'm producing, but I'm letting Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, and even our old boy George Lucas to come back and make shit, right? You guys handle it, but I'm watching everything from above here. He's just perched up watching Marvel and Star Wars from his you know, his ivory tower, so to speak. But it's I have trust with someone like you know, Kevin Feige to do something like that properly. You know, like, I don't have you know, like, with something like Star Wars in the state that it is now, it's on life support. You know.
Yeah, it's basically that, like, Mandalorian gave it more extra life, because I don't think if Mandalorian did not come out and it wasn't a good thing, essentially people would just be talking about Rise of Skywalker, and it'd just be negative thoughts all around. And then even then, there has been things of like, who really would, like, no one was really that interested to see Rise of Skywalker, and I think that's why they try to touch on the nostalgia points from like, hey, you know, this is all coming to an end. But, you know, it kind of didn't work out too well for them. And I feel like that's kind of where Star Wars is. So I feel like at this point, they need to move away from the Skywalkers, and they just need to explore the rest of the universe and have good quality stories. And I think that's the main problem, because, like, Star Wars is such an expansive universe, and it has so many ways that can go. That's why everyone's thinking about, you know, Knights of the Old Republic timeline, or even like way further in the future where they're just like, this has nothing, like, it'd be like a DC thing where it's like, we're gonna, like, the Batman, the future Batman or whatever it was,
Batman Beyond,
Batman Beyond, where they're just like, let's just set all the way in the future, have everyone that was related before not existent, and kind of start from scratch type of thing. You can do all this type of stuff. The real question is they won't do it. I don't think.
Well, yeah, I think, like I said before, they just need to come in. They just need to say that these 3 remake movies are non-canon, and then just restart it again, right? It might lead to a Terminator 2 problem, right? Like, whereas, you know, the sequels will always be worse than the stuff that came before it. But hey, I think honestly they just need somebody to kind of coordinate things better up there. Like, just replace Kathleen with Feige or someone else, and I think it'll do a lot better. Especially given that, like, you know, at the moment, like, you know, another thing that kind of got that was in the rumor mill of a show that's going to be coming out is a Secret Invasion TV series. So based around, like, you know, the Skrulls, who are, like, you know, secret operatives, like, around the world. There's going to maybe be a show about. And the thing is, I think, you know, we also saw that there's a WandaVision show. There's also the Loki TV show, and there's going to be like a Miss Marvel TV show as well. You know, based around, like, Kamala Khan. And there's also the Falcon. Winter Soldier show, right? Like, these are the kind of shows that are coming out now. The thing that's pretty important is each of these kind of TV shows is kind of like almost like a preamble or a kind of lead up to a big screen movie in a way, right? And I think that's kind of what we're going to be seeing. Like if you look at, you'd think initially, oh well, the Falcon and Winter Soldier one won't have too much to do with the Black Widow movie, but I can imagine it being related, like as in, maybe towards the end of the show, maybe they find out that out that Black Widow is still alive, and then that's what leads into like the Black Widow movie, which is technically based after the Captain America 3 movie, Civil War, right? My prediction is maybe like Black Widow isn't dead, and that the Black Widow we see in the in Endgame and stuff is actually like a Skrull agent that's pretended to be. It's a cop out, yes, definitely, but it's a way that they can try to organically reintroduce Scarlett Johansson to still be in the MCU without having to without using Infinity Gems and stuff like that, because I obviously can't use those anymore. To kind of be like, oh, after the events of the Black Widow movie, she was put in a coma or something like that, or she was like frozen or some shit, and then that's when Bucky and then find her, and then that leads to like something else. But I don't know, that's just like a harebrained idea that came from me. But if you look at something like WandaVision, WandaVision, I think they even announced that WandaVision is going to directly lead into the Doctor Strange movie.
Yes,
the Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah,
which makes sense because if you think about it.
Yeah, it does make sense because like what Scarlet Witch, I guess the connection there as well, and I don't know. There have been rumors. I think like they're saying that like Quicksilver might be coming back, and I feel like that has the openness to kind of do whatever they kind of need to do.
Well, not only that, like also the fact that like if they kind of the Multiverse of Madness is a lot of like the usage of M, which isn't that weird because of like Marvel M, but like House of M is a pretty kind of important storyline for Scarlet Witch, in which she kind of gets rid of like mutants and so maybe she kind of does something that results in the return of X-Men and mutants in the universe, right? Or reintroduces mutants in the world. But yeah, like I think WandaVision is probably going to be about her, bringing back or missing Vision. They technically have kids together. There's a rumor of there being like a young Avengers TV shows, and her children have been on that TV show, so maybe like alongside Kamala Khan, and maybe if they have like a Miles Morales, or even just like the regular Spider-Man actor who's escaping me, like they could have him being like Tom young Avengers. Tom Holland, like they could have Tom Holland be like the leader of the young Avengers. Whoever's left can be like the main Avengers kind of people instead. Like it could be a strategy to get like young kids to watch these Marvel movies, even though they will. It's a good way have synergy or synergize between different things. At the same time, Miss Marvel and if the Secret Invasion TV series ends up being true, like they could be precursors to the Captain Marvel 2 movie, which has also been confirmed, right? At the same time, there's a Loki movie, which is also a movie that will probably also lead up to the Thor 4 movie that's coming up as well, Thor: Love and Thunder. Sorry, is it Thor 3? Thor 4, right?
Thor 4.
Yeah.
It's hard to say it.
Yeah. So yeah, I can imagine it kind of seems to be the case that there's a movie that's coming out, or a TV show based around a character that will maybe lead into the movie. Like that's how they kind of do it, and that's the way I'm kind of seeing it kind of pieced together, and that's only done through the kind of through the eyes of someone like Kevin Feige, who's kind of like seeing how the strings and how they all attach together, and I think that's ultimately what they need in order to do well.
Absolutely. I completely agree with your point. And I feel like on the DC side of things, you would say they're probably not doing that, but I guess they've kind of got their semi-own strategy of doing things, and they don't necessarily have to have a like representation of each character has to be this, and as well as kind of being like this is in this universe and this is in that universe. Like, that's the thing. Next week, but next week we'll see like Birds of Prey And what
Oh
is the
boy, that is
continuation of?
not going to be. That's going to
And the real question is, where's the continuation of this? And is this related to anything? Do people
It's going to
care?
be bad. It's
Yeah.
going to be bad. It's going to be bad. But you know what isn't bad? The Harley Quinn TV series, which is sorry, the anime that's on DC Universe. Now I've been watching a lot of that. I think there's like one episode left, but it's really good. I've really been enjoying it. She's really good. Kaylee Kuko, she's Penny from The Big Bang Theory. She's doing an excellent job, kind of voicing like kind of like the post Flashpoint New 52 style of Harley Quinn. She's kind of like a bit of a as opposed to like the traditional Harley Quinn, in the old costume and with the New Yorker accent. She doesn't sound like that. But yeah, like it's so the premise is, Harley breaks up with the Joker because Joker's been like screwing around with her, and so she wants to make her own kind of she wants to be her own villain and make it into the League of Villains. But along the way, she kind of has a colorful cast of characters. Like the thing that I really like is that there's a lot of really comedic versions of classic characters.
Yeah, and I feel like that is the main problem that I think a lot of I guess hardcore people kind of have, because it's like it is a different take.
Okay.
There is a different take on these characters, which I don't mind. Like I feel like when
I don't know. I kind of feel like everybody who's been watching been enjoying it.
well, that's the thing. I feel like a lot of people who are watching it are enjoying it. I think I know that I think there might be like a vocal minority of people who are just like, this isn't my Harley Quinn, or this isn't my, like, for example, like Bane is the butt of a joke because he's like really stupid. And it's like, oh, this is not my Bane from like the comics that I read. And the real question is that I feel like since it's an animated thing, you can go off the wall, and this show has a Deadpool obviously type tone where it's just funny. It's not taking itself seriously. And,
I mean, that's essentially
we're not going to take any of the other characters in this universe seriously as well. Like everyone has their own little thing and their own little take to it. So it's not officially 100% like this is our adaptation. That like for example, the one of the funny things that I found is exploring the relationship between Jim Gordon and Batman. And Jim Gordon's like an alcoholic, and he doesn't really do his job that well. I'm like, that's funny. Yeah. Like it kind of works in the this universe they kind of built up where all these characters are just kind of like completely different from the comic counterpart.
You see, I kind of see it as the show is kind of like what the comics are. It's kind of like the Harley Quinn comics are, which is essentially like your view. It's not necessarily true what's happening. It's purely from like the lens of Harley Quinn and how she imagines everything to be, right? But obviously it's very slapstick because that's the kind of character she is. Like probably my favorite character from the series has got to be Clayface, because he's just like this kind of pompous English sounding actor, who every time, because he can pretend to be someone, but he always sounds the same, which I just consistently like. But then there's this shot where he's doing an impression of Aquaman, but he sounds exactly the same as the real life Aquaman the Aquaman in the TV series. They almost sound exactly the same. So yeah, there's a lot of really interesting gags. It's also very adult as well, so like there's a lot of like it's very violent, it's got blood and stuff like that. They use they do cut out some cursing in it, but there's a lot of stuff, cursing and swearing in it, that's still in it. That's really great. The thing that I was really kind of happy about is like the animation quality is like really good, like as opposed to like them kind of skimping out on it. I think consistently DC seems to do a good job at that, but I was just surprised of just how good it is.
Yeah, it does run pretty smoothly, because Warner Brothers I think has a good TV arm of animation. Like they did, like back in the 90s they did like Animaniacs, and obviously the animated series, and all these types of things. So they've consistently had a good animation arm. So like when they announced it, I was hoping they didn't skimp out on the budget, and they clearly did.
Because there were those like really kind of like DC movies that are kind of set in like the New 52, where like the animation could be kind of choppy here and there. Those have kind of improved over time, but I was like hoping, okay, please be good, and it ended up being good. I recommend the Harley Quinn TV series. It's like, again, like I think I'm kind of liking most of the stuff coming out of DC Universe. They are putting a lot of cool shit.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
they've got good content. I would say, and I feel like obviously we don't know what's next really after this almost, because they pretty much said that the plan was just to have all these shows come up right after another, so then you can't really cancel your subscription. And obviously, I think, what is it, Stargirl or whatever it is going to CW. So the real question is,
Yeah.
what's going next? And obviously, there's all the HBO Max stuff. So, as far as we know, obviously, Doom Patrol 2 season 2 is happening, as well as Titan season 3.
Hmm.
But I'm very curious what else they're gonna set in this universe, and maybe they can do another. And obviously, they got Young Justice, but I'm thinking, maybe they can expand a lot of the different animated stuff as well, and maybe. I wouldn't say probably go back to Batman, because that's going to be very hard thing to do, because I think that was very much a lightning in a bottle situation. But something even DC, you can bring back like the semi Green Lantern animated show that lasted one season, but it was kind of getting somewhere. Or like you can bring, or have it an Aquaman animated show, and I think it'd have it more of a different tone, because obviously the Harley Quinn show is just comedic, all round fun, kind of adult humor, and I just really enjoyed the show.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I guess we'll move on to our next kind of DC property stuff that we've been talking about. They finally had the last couple of episodes for the kind of big Crisis on Infinite Earths finish. What did you think about them? I think they had like the Arrow episode, and they had the uh, what is Legends of Tomorrow episode, which was kind of a surprise. Finished it on Legends of Tomorrow, but I kind of get why they did it, to kind of get people to watch that show, right?
Yeah.
What did you think about the last two episodes?
um, I thought it was good, but not great. Obviously, I think obviously the main thing is, like, I'm pretty sure it's not really spoilers, because we've talked about it all the time, but like the whole Oliver dying thing, and it's like obviously I think the main thing is like it's just the impact of that. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that was kind of like, obviously most majority of fans knew that was happening, that in that whole type of thing, and um I don't know. For me, shock value wasn't really a thing, but I think it was more like,
No.
what I liked and enjoyed more was obviously seeing the reaction of the, I guess, characters in the universe, and how I guess they reacted to Oliver's death, because essentially, you know, uh, it's kind of been building up upon that, and I thought like the I guess the crossover, the finale 2 episodes of the crossover, like there was one episode that kind of felt like a semi recap of everything, but aside from that, I feel like they basically delivered what they kind of needed to do, and they had fan favorites, and they kind of pushed it in. So I'm relatively pretty much happy with the adaptation.
See,
That.
yeah, well, the one thing I was kind of surprised about, um, that this is essentially. Oh, sorry. The big surprise was that they had Ezra Miller, um, Ezra Miller's Flash,
Mm-hmm.
in one of the episodes, which obviously was all over the internet, and it's just like, oh, that's really cool. They had just like a random interaction with like the movie version of the Flash, you know.
I guess he's still
Um,
the Flash.
I guess, like, well, you see, here's the difference, right? The difference between Ezra Miller, Henry Cavill, is that Ezra Miller seems to be somebody who's willing to play ball, right? He'd play ball when it matters. And as much as I like Henry Cavill, I think the big thing that happened is he chose not to play ball when DC needed him to, among other things. And yeah, look, the last couple of episodes of the thing is, I felt like we kind of see Oliver dying again, right? Like that was like another thing, that happens. They kind of defeat the Anti-Monitor per se, and a new reality kind of comes out. But then like the Legends of Tomorrow episode is, oh, we have to like lock the Anti-Monitor away for good, otherwise he'll come back. And so like, to be fair, like it kind of felt like, compared to something, I think the best crossover, or like the one that had, I think, probably a lot of budget into it, was probably the Crisis on Earth. Oh, sorry, the Earth X, right? Like
Yeah,
the
I
Earth
think that
X
was like
crossover,
not last year, 2019, but I think it was
the year
2018. Yeah.
before, right? I feel like that one was probably the best crossover because I think the most people in it, and there was a lot of moving parts working it together, and it also had some really interesting acting chops for Stephen Amell and Supergirl in it as well. But yeah, like it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, it didn't feel as grand and epic, even though like this is supposed to kind of be the equivalent of like the Infinity Gem or the Crisis series of like events is supposed to be that on that level. But like I mentioned, I think in the previous podcast, it kind of seems like the Crisis of Infinite Earth crossover done by the Arrowverse was an Endgame level event that was done with the Endgame lunch budget. Like that's what it seems to be. Like that's the difference in terms of like quality.
And that's the thing. They couldn't really do much about that because obviously
No, exactly.
they have the certain fundings, and they kind of had they had what they could do, I guess. Because like obviously, there's not that many actual action set pieces. I think most of it is a lot of setup, and I think the joy of it is the characters interacting with each other. Even small things of like Black Lightning, for example, coming into the team. I thought that was really like interesting, cool, because basically he's like segregated more or less in the CW universe. And and kind of seeing everyone kind of play off each other is really great to kind of see. And I think those are and having those little moments, I think, are what makes these crossovers kind of the best things for me personally, as well as an in universe person. Because as you mentioned before, with the Ezra Miller cameo type of thing, it kind of more or less confirms that obviously the multiverse is real. Like obviously they say it, but they show like the DC universe shows like glimpses of him. But then it 100% confirms that at this point, it may be like, for me, I kind of look at it as like a 4D chess move, and I'm just like, okay, so they basically confirmed multi-universe type of thing, so that means they could do that in the movies. That could explain the 2019 Joker film with Suicide Squad. You know what I mean? I think that to me that was like a fan thing.
Yeah, but at the same time, like it's like a nudge and a win thing, right? Like in terms of all the things that happen in DC. It's all kind of connected, and they all have their own kind of Earth. You have like I was surprised that they made it. The one big surprise that I had in regards to, because they obviously all the Earths got destroyed, but then they reformed, which is very much in line with the Crisis of Infinite Earths. Like instead of having infinite Earths, they make a single Earth. That all the planets kind of combine, and it kind of fixes a lot of continuity issues, such as Hawk Girl is technically from Earth 2, which is like the golden age of DC Comics, but she made like regular appearances in Earth 1, so wait, but that's like the Silver Age, like what's going on? So like they just kind of like culminated it, and it kind of snipped a lot of the stuff that I thought was really dumb, like Supergirl is on another Earth, and so
she can't help us now.
Well, yeah, but it's like in order to do a crossover, she has to like get teleported from her Earth to our Earth. Like it seems like such a but that's the thing. Like this is what I kind of knew this going forward. Like that was that was always going to be their intention. Like by making these kind of shows take place on separate Earths. Even like I remember when we were initially talking about Black Lightning. We were like, oh, like where is this set? Like, oh, it's clearly not set on any of the other Earths, but there's obviously the potential of them interacting, and eventually that's what happened. You had like, and it's really great because I think in the Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl and the Flash meet, and they're like, wait, you're on my Earth? It's like, no, we're on the same Earth, but only the people who kind of, which are conveniently the main characters of their own show, remember the events before Crisis. And the thing is, in that way, it does result in some really interesting story. But before I kind of go on with that, the one disappointment I had is, it's both something I really liked, but it was also a really big disappointment, was Oliver Queen eventually becoming the Spectre, who is an important like superhero or a kind of like almost like a supernatural being that fights the Anti-Monitor during the Crisis of Infinite Earth event. I thought it was very clever that they made him become the Spectre, because they look very similar. Like they both wear green hoods, and but the thing is, it felt really rushed in the actual show, and his outfit kind of looked really bootleg. Like, it looks very CW. Like, it would have been cool if they put some CGI budget in trying to make him look like, corporeal, or maybe like kind of gaseous, which is kind of like what the character looks like.
After all, like, this is the more or less end event, so it's like you might as well make it kind of send off with a bang almost.
Yeah, and I feel like his final, like, even the cloak looked fine, but then like everything else just looked really basic. Like, that was like my disappointing. Like, and they rushed it. Like, all of a sudden they introduced Jim Corrigan, who was the previous, like, who is like in the comics, he's the person who is the Spectre, right? And in like kind of the last episode before the break, they're like, "Oh, I'm Jim Corrigan, and you've been chosen to be Spectre." It's like, wait, what? Like, what the hell is that? Like, they should have had it that, like, maybe in season, like during the Arrow season, or maybe in the season before that, they had Jim Corrigan and they had him watching Oliver, and Oliver being like, "Who the fuck are you?" Like, they could have had that interaction, but they didn't. So it resulted in them. And the thing is, again, remember, they set this this crossover event over a year ago, during the last kind of crossover event between Flash, Arrow, and Supergirl. They were the only kind of three in the last year's crossover. There wasn't like a lot of people. It was like much more small scale. But they knew ahead of time that, oh hey, like, we are making Crisis, but then they didn't do some, like, this was like an area that they kind of really failed on. And I feel like, while it was cool that they made Oliver the Spectre in the end, like, and it does have him have the ability to come back in the future, like, I feel like they kind of did my man dirty, like, in the end. Like, they could have done a better job, like, at sending him off. But the thing is, like, there was the Arrow episode that came out. There's like one, you've seen both of them, right? The one that sets up the new TV show in 2040.
Yeah, basically the Birds of Prey TV show, which is not related.
The Birds of Prey,
which is not related to the movie. And I feel like this one is the TV version is probably going to be a more accurate representation of the Birds of Prey, I guess, team.
Do you think it's going to be called Arrow still, or do you think it's going to be called, like, Arrow and the Birds of Prey? Like, they're going to call it something else?
I feel like they could easily get a good break from Arrow, because the real question is, does the name Arrow have the branding power? Because obviously, people like you and me, like, we obviously know that it's in the same universe, and like, the people who watch these shows will be like, yeah, this is like something like a Legends of Tomorrow. Like, we don't need DC's Legend of Tomorrow, I guess. Like, we already know what it kind of is. The real question is, like, I don't know.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and think about it. Look. Think about this. The fact that the new show is based around Mia Smoke, who is obviously the daughter of Oliver Queen, right? It's set in 2040, so 20 years from this year of 2020, right? So if you think about it, the current show, if they do like Arrow 2040 or Arrow, it's basically Batman Beyond. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I realized it just now as I was thinking, it's like, oh wait, this show's
like, wait a second.
It's essentially set in the future. Arrow, the TV show, is basically initially started out to be, and Arrow as a superhero started out as essentially a Batman knockoff. And so this show is basically the Batman Beyond knockoff. Like, it just makes me more angry about how so much cooler this entire show would have been if it was just based around Batman. That's it. It would have been significantly better, but I really liked all the character moments. Obviously, like, like, there was like the funeral scene, like in the Arrow finale, where, like, a lot of the characters came back, and I'm like, oh wow, we haven't seen a lot of these people in ages. It turned out that Oliver brought back his mom, who had died previously. They didn't have Manu Bennett, which was pretty disappointed in, because I really like.
Yeah, he is a good Deathstroke.
I like that kind of like bromance. They're kind of like, they ended up being enemies, but they ended up being brothers at the end of. And it's a shame that we don't get to see any more of that going.
Yeah, but regardless, like, we saw a lot of older, I guess, characters. Like, obviously we saw the Queen come back. We even saw even like someone like Felicity Smoke, who is nowhere really to be seen in the past like season. sort of kind of come back almost.
Yeah, I think the thing is the actress was kind of more or less done with with the show.
She's like, "Yep,
right?
I'm done."
Yeah, because I think honestly, like a lot of people didn't like the Felicity Felicity kind of romance between her and uh, Oliver Queen. But like I think they do have like a lot of on-screen chemistry, which I do admit they do have a lot of on-screen chemistry, and I think Felicity as a character is good. It's just unfortunately that they made her from being like a quirky, assistant or like kind of side character to like a front and center character, much like CW does. Like, oh hey, let's just make him the main focus. Like again, they did the same thing with Iris. Like Iris was great. This is a problem. You see, Iris started off as a journalist,
And she didn't
in the
know
first.
anything like who is the Flash.
Yeah, which is fine. Like that's fine that she doesn't, whether she does or doesn't know. But then they make her to be like, oh, now she's a leader of Team Arrow, and now she carries a gun for some reason. Like, but eventually they circled back to, oh wait, we have to make her a journalist again, right? Oh, let's make her have her own
Make her worry
journalism
about
company.
like I have to write the article where my husband dies, and
Yeah, like
I don't know if I'm
it's
gonna be a
so
good
bizarre.
writer. And it's just like,
It's
okay,
it
this came back.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. Like in regards to like, oh, they made her a journalist, and then they're like, oh, fuck her being a journalist. We're gonna make her something completely different. But it's like, oh wait, no, we've got to make her a journalist again. Like, yeah, it's one of the things that's really weird. But it'll be interesting to see how the shows function going forward. I feel like it almost has like a similar effect to how Endgame had. For the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's like the story's been told. It'll be interesting to see whether the other shows survive for as long as they will, because I think Supergirl has obviously not doing as well. Like the numbers aren't as well as they used to be. Even though I think not not last season, but this yeah no actually last season, correct, last season. Last season was really good. I really liked the last season of Supergirl, as I've mentioned again. Like it's obviously it's it has its problem here or there. It has a lot of great ideas, and obviously they introduce Lex Luthor, who, by the way, for the new Supergirl TV series, one of the biggest kind of curveballs in the new universe is that Lex Luthor is still alive, and he's currently running the organization Supergirl works for. But Supergirl and a lot of the main like, no, oh wait, Lex is a bad guy. But they can't tell. But they can't tell everyone that that's the case, and now they have to work with an evil Lex Luthor who everybody loves in the new universe and thinks he's a good guy and gives to charity and saves puppies and shit like that. Like it's interesting because every TV show is currently dealing with their own iteration of this, like the consequences of a new universe being formed.
Yeah, and,
So,
I'm glad they didn't walk it back where it's like, oh, and everything is like reset.
kind of the same. Like I kind of saw it, like they kind of did the same thing with Batwoman as well. Like the one thing is like Beth, which is her sister, who is like kind of the main villain, Alice. Like there is an alternate version of her sister who appears in the latest episode. She's just like, who the fuck are you? Like, but then like eventually realize, wait, you're from another universe. So I don't know what that's going to lead to. But yeah, they each have their own kind of unique situation that they're dealing with because of the crisis. There hasn't been a Flash episode that's come out? I don't know.
No, I haven't, because yeah, it's
No,
basically
so
just been Legend Tomorrow and the last two, I guess, episodes of Arrow. So yeah, it is very curious of where the rest of them are gonna kind of fit in and go, because as you mentioned before, I think like last podcast that the I think what is it, Legend Tomorrow is probably on its way out, and probably a few of them are.
yeah,
So
I mean, Batwoman did really bad in terms of people watching the TV show. I think outside of like the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover is kind of like an exception to the rules, but in terms of viewing dropping because the quality is not that good. Like I can obviously admit that. Like I unfortunately watch the show just so I can just be like, oh well, I don't know. I'm just
I've watched the thing, but that's the thing. It's like it all kind of comes back to the finale of Arrow, because the final episode is pretty much I felt like a almost what do you call it, like a meta version of talking to the audience, because it's basically just like Ollie started the modern superhero type of thing, and it's kind of like it is kind of true in a sense of like uh you know Green Arrow, the show Arrow, kind of started and paved the way for the rest of these CW shows to kind of exist and coexist. And I feel like it was kind of a celebration of Arrow and what it's done, like inside their universe, but as well as just in total, kind of on our universe. Like like I think there was a moment at the funeral where John Jiggle's talking about the impact of Oliver, and and they said, oh yeah, these heroes are coming out, and then you there's a obviously purposely full shot of like Flash and Supergirl there, so it's kind of like a a nice homage. And that's why, like, with the season finale, I thought it was a pretty good, I guess, send off, because there's not really much else to really
actually, as a side note, they obviously do a lot of flashback between. There's a flashback between Diggle and Ollie, like back during his first year as a vigilante, and there's an excellent fight choreography where he's just taking down just like a billion dudes, and it just reminded me of like, man, season 1 and 2 had some of the best fight scenes, like for a TV, like a CW TV quality like show. Like, it was excellent. It's just like a good like maybe like 5 or 10 minutes of him just taking down dudes and having like unlimited arrows in his quiver, taking them all down. Yeah, he literally got one scene where he like gets a dude and like slams him into a pipe, and you see like the pipe's visibility. Like, obviously it's like rigged to look like that, but it's like, in terms of like the show, like how it visually looks, like it looks excellent. And yeah, it sucks that like the choreography kind of dipped after like season.
I'd say after season 2/3, because I honestly feel like at that point it was a proof of concept that just like, okay, we don't have Batman, this is kind of Batman, let us show you what we can do. And I think like obviously that's when they tried really hard, and and I feel like obviously since there was less and less of the Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, and then you got more of the rest of his team, obviously fight scenes and dynamics type of change, and obviously,
and he also chose not to kill. I think that's also a big
that one as well. I do remember at the start it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's literally killing people left and right in the first season, first 2 seasons even, but it's all about him kind of learning over time that, hey, like, shouldn't kill some of these people, and then in season 4 he kills Damien Darhk. So it's kind of like a little bit it's Greg Berlanti and his ilk in terms of like how they're writing it, but this is kind of like what the Crisis Event does. It kind of like, in a way, like, hey, all those 9 seasons, like, they happened, but like canonically a lot of stuff is a lot different. So yeah, it kind of fixes up a lot of issues that you might have had with the show itself. So going forward, like, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because again, like, you made another thing, like kind of how Oliver was there at the beginning, and he's there at the proverbial end during the Great Crisis Event, and he sacrifices himself, much like how Robert Downey Jr., he started the MCU and he ended it. Like thinking back on it, I'm like, it makes perfect sense for it to be Iron Man to be the one who dies at the end of Endgame. Like, I remember there was a speculation of being like, oh, would it be him or would it be Captain America? But it makes a lot of sense that, yeah, like, the person who was there at the beginning and who's also cost Marvel the most is going to be the one who sacrifices himself at the end. And so, much like, it's kind of poetic how both of these kind of shows kind of emulate that. The one interesting thing is, like, at the end, well, actually, there's 2 things. The first one being, Felicity at the end of, I think, last season, like, disappears with the Monitor, and he takes her somewhere, and then we kind of see where he takes her, which is to like where Oliver first saw her during like season 1, which is like kind of like a Queen consolidated office. It's really weird. Like, I didn't really get like what does it really represent, but I think in the end it's like it's meant to be heaven, right? Like, or like some kind of place where Oliver Queen is. But at the same time, it also kind of allows him as like an emergency like
emergency
but
like out type of
yeah,
thing. Like if
yeah,
ratings
out.
if ratings are bad, please break glass to get Stephen
Yeah,
Amell back.
Stephen Amell back. Cause like yeah, because I think Amell is kind of the person who's kind of like, hey, I want to kind of step away from, doing the Arrow TV show, right? But this gives them like a good opportunity to be like, if they need him for a crossover or they need him for, they need to do like the other like kind of big events like such as the Green Lantern crossover like Darkest Nights or Blackest Night crossover. They might like, oh hey, look, we're going to use Oliver Queen. The other big kind of exciting thing that's happening is as Diggle was moving to Metropolis, right? Um, something crashes and he explodes, hits his van, and it's like a box, and there's something green coming out of it. And speculation is, it's going to be a Green Lantern ring.
Well, it's
So
pretty
he's going to be a
obvious.
Green
Like
Lantern.
it's obvious.
Well, I mean, look, I'm not gonna.
Because
Look,
what else glows? What
it could be
kryptonite?
It could be kryptonite.
Is he gonna
It could
be
be
like, oh,
kryptonite.
I'm gonna use kryptonite on Supergirl because I hate her so much? Like,
Well, here's the thing, because there's going to be the Superman and Lois Lane TV show that's coming out, and so it makes sense that because I forget the actor who plays Superman, in the new canon, but like yeah, he's so obviously John Diggle's going to, Metropolis, so they're going to probably have an interact. He's going to be the side character for his character, if that makes sense, right? And so, yeah, it makes sense that, yeah, maybe they're introducing him. The other big theory I remember hearing is that, and I kind of like it because it might make sense. So John Diggle, Diggle is like, I guess technically like not his real last name, if that makes sense. It's like it's at least like one of his potential names because he has like a father, who I believe his last name is Stewart, right?
and that's
And
why it's John. Yep.
well, yeah, but so it's John Diggle, but he's also known as John Stewart, who is the second. So he's technically supposed to be the second iteration of John Stewart. So they even said like like, oh, here we go. In 2015, Ramsey, who I'm not too sure, is that the oh yeah, Dave Ramsey.
I think
yeah,
it's Dave Ramsey.
yeah.
Yeah.
In 2015, Ramsey confirms that there has been talk of turning Diggle into John Diggle Stewart. This was referenced in the 2018's Elseworlds crossover event, where Barry Allen of Earth 90 indicates that on his Earth, Diggle is the Green Lantern. So I think also like I want to say there was like an episode, I think maybe it was like last season of Arrow, where there's like his stepfather, Diggle's stepfather, who's like this army dude. I'm pretty sure his like last name might have been Stewart. So like that kind of gets around like, oh, he's supposed to be John Stewart, who is the second Green Lantern. So that kind of like, I personally think that's like a really, really excellent way. Like, to be honest, a lot of these superheroes kind of have like very similar names. That's why the
Martha,
whole Martha controversy, right? Like, happened because like, oh yeah, John this and John that. Like, yeah, it's a good way to kind of ride around it. So there's also that. So, but I don't think John, John Diggle is going to be the main actor for the Green Lantern TV show. I think that's going to be a completely different show, with a different Green Lantern. So I think this Green Lantern with John Diggle is just going to be the CW version that's going to be interacting exclusively with Superman in the Metropolis TV show, or whatever they want to call that one. And then there's also going to be Supergirl, who's in Central City? Yeah, not Central City. Whatever weird ass city she's in.
Sure, not Gotham City.
Not Gotham City. In Central City is where the Flash is, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, like it's as opposed to like it being Post City, which is where Hal Jordan is from, right? Like they're all these kind of generic generic names, right? So that's the state of the Arrow universe at the moment. It'll be interesting to see how everything's go forward. I am pretty interested in seeing what a CW version of Green Lantern manifests as. Is it just going to be, and John Diggle shoots out green laser beam from his ring,
consistently.
you know,
Because
right?
yeah. Okay, the more you think about the budget, the more and more I'm thinking about how they're gonna do this. Because obviously they've done it. They're gonna in the DC universe stuff. They got their own Green Lantern thing. So maybe he's gonna be like a side character, and he branches the two stuff
No,
together. I don't know.
I don't think it's going to be related at all. I think they're not going to be like there's nothing confirmed. It could be because they said that there's going to be Sinestro and there's going to be two other Green Lanterns, right? So I think like it's going to be something about Hal Jordan, whereas this ring is like it's set in its own it's in its own continuity. It's going to have a bigger budget and stuff. Whereas what we're going to be seeing with Diggle Superman is going to be him trying to learn by himself what it is. But most of the time, it's just going to be John Diggle puts green force fields around everyone because that's pretty cheap to do in a CGI budget.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I honestly think it's going to manifest. And he shoots green laser beams. That's what it's going to turn into. But then maybe over time he learns, oh hey, I can make because the thing is, it's the same thing with like I think. Like John Stewart in the comics, he either worked in the army or the navy. So a lot of his kind of Green Lantern constructs are very meticulous and accurate because he's also an architect as well. So he will make like a gun that actually like a giant gun that's really like very accurate, or a giant building or something. So it'd be interesting to see how it works for Diggle. Like, does he just like fucking make like a giant green gun or some shit?
Yes, because the first thing you think of is a gun. So why don't you just use guns?
Yeah, well, that's all he does. He just use Green Lantern green gun. That's it.
Yeah, that's his nickname, Green Guns.
But yeah, that's the situation with Arrow going forward. But personally, I think like everything's kind of going into a decline, so they might have to kind of do some kind of revamp, and I think that's kind of what DC is kind of hoping for as well, for these kind of shows to kind of, they'll finish off their story, but then eventually they'll need to like kind of reboot what they want to do in the universe going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. So we've basically been talking about a lot of movies, and I mean not a lot of movies, we've been a lot of TV shows, but not enough movies. So my real question to you, Chatters, just as a kind of a segue, is have you been watching any movies? Because it seems like we've been kind of on the TV show train, I guess.
Yeah, you see, look, I've mentioned it before. I've got like commitment issues when it comes to watching movies, right? Like TV shows, like they're very easy to digest and consume because it's like, oh, it's like 40 minutes or 20 minutes. I don't have to sit down for an hour and watch it. Although what tends to happen when I'm behind or when I really get into something, I'll just watch like several hours of it. But with a movie, like for example, like I want to kind of watch a bunch of movies, because like what is the Oscars are coming out next week, correct?
I think it's like a week and a half.
Sorry,
yeah.
The Academy Awards. Sorry.
Does it really matter?
Like, yeah, well, is it the same thing? I keep forgetting.
They are literally the exact same thing. I think the Academy is like the people, and they call them the Academy Awards, but Academy Awards. Oscars. But it doesn't really matter. Right. But it doesn't really matter. But there's a lot of Oscar movies that are basically came out, and I guess I'm more of the head of the trend when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think so. You're definitely always ahead of the trend when it comes to all these movies, out of the both of us at least. Because like even something with like The Irishman, like I've heard like it's not Pacino's like best work, but like it's like decent, but it's also 3 hours.
It's as you mentioned, time commitment.
Oh yeah, exactly. And yeah, at the moment, like like I was on my list, like Irishman. I need to watch Parasite because I don't know. Initially, I was kind of like, but then everybody's saying it's good, so I'm like, all right, well, maybe I'll go.
Well, good thing, Chatters, is I can give you a good rundown of probably what to see first and kind of.
Let me just name the others that I need to kind of watch. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Marriage Story, and 1917. So tell me what because I want to kind of revamp my list of top movies. I've been keeping like a bit of a list, but it's obviously not complete. And I watched like what did I watch? I watched like Toy Story 4, and that like kicked out a movie from my list because I was like, oh, okay, that was actually
it's like damn Pixar making me feel.
Well, yeah, like honestly, it's not the best Toy Story movie, but I kind of liked it. Like it's very
especially
interesting,
for like a fourth movie. It's like, oh, It's still a story.
Well, you've seen Toy Story 4, right? Like, I
Yes.
don't think we talked about it, but like, I was kind of surprised, like, that it, you know, it's a bit of a spoiler for everyone, but I was surprised that they decided to be like, oh, by the way, Woody's no longer going to be a part of the gang anymore. Like, oh, okay.
Apparently there was a deleted scene where it was going to be a lot more of a tragic ending where I think he was going to leave with Bo Peep and then he basically Bo Peep's like, yeah, nah, I want to stay, and then basically Woody's by himself. And yeah, that would be tragic.
Wait, stay with who? Like,
Stay with the gang,
gang?
like the gang, and like
Oh.
get it like I think a new family. I think so. Either way, it was gonna be like, oh man, he's just by himself. That's even more tragic.
You see, I think the thing is, like, it sets up for more Toy Story, so I think, like, it's kind of like a little bit of a clickbait, where it's like, oh, you know, like a red herring, like, think like, oh, he's leaving, but really he's going to be in Toy Story 5. You know, like, he kind of comes back and lands, family is what's important, or some shit. And
Yes,
I love
Fast and
Buzz
Furious,
Lightyear.
that shit.
Yeah, family, you know. So yeah, like, you know, and you know, I don't want to mention just because, like, there are a couple of movies that, like, uh you know, for example, like Jumanji 2. Like, I haven't seen Jumanji.
Yeah, I haven't seen Jumanji 2, but I'm assuming, yeah, good things, I suppose.
Apparently, it's better than Star Wars. You know, like,
see, big off. But essentially, yeah, the movies that you kind of ran down to, I'd suggest seeing 1917 first, purely because that's in the cinemas at the moment, and it's one of those movies that needs you probably need to watch it like in a cinematic type of
yeah,
feel.
like, it's really interesting because it was in the category for winning, like, best CGI, right? Because and not even like something like Endgame got into, like, this is what I kind of hate about the Academy Awards, right? It's like, oh yeah, we'll have the Irishman in it because, oh, they made Al Pacino, oh sorry, not Al Pacino, like,
Matt Scorsese, Robert De Niro, like
they make,
you've
like,
got the big people in there.
yeah, it's like, yeah, you make them all young, like, all right, but, like, what about fucking sending giant fucking aliens and, you know, explosions and shit? Like, there's a lot of really good stuff that they did in it. Like, Endgame doesn't have to be like a fucking, you know, a cream of the crop in terms of, like, acting quality, you know. But, like, you know, it's really weird that they don't give props to said movies that they do to others. But then I saw, like, 1917 was there, and then a lot of people had said, like, oh yeah, it's like, it looks really great and the visuals are really excellent in it. So I'm like, all right, cool, I'll put it on my list of things to watch. So yeah, so you'd recommend 1917?
Yeah, absolutely. As a general mini review, I really enjoyed the film. It has its clear kind of focus. And basically my whole thing is this is the movie that Dunkirk wanted to be, but Dunkirk failed because it tried to have different characters and different executions at the same time. This one's just a simple story of two soldiers who are given the mission to get to the other side of kind of like no man's land to tell an army to stop an attack because it's a trap. And that's kind of like the simple premise of the movie. But, you know, obviously shot amazingly with cinematography. Cinematography guy is Roger Deakins. He's one of the most prolific people. You know, he did pretty much Blade Runner 2049. You know, he's done Skyfall. You know, basically the shots that are there, they're really perfect.
Yeah, both of those movies are really...
Yeah, so like he you know, obviously he knows his camera shots really well. And I think on top of this, I know some people hate it when like some people I know hate it when I like I guess talk about the meta of the film, but essentially it's made to look like it's done in one take.
Right, yeah. That's been a pretty... I heard the same thing too. Like, you know, a lot of movies are trying to... what was it, Birdman, the one that kind of did like the one take stuff?
Yeah, Birdman did it, but obviously I think this movie does it a lot more in a better way because Birdman they'd use I guess like handheld sort of shaky cam to kind of like blur out and then cover it up with CGI. In this one, the camera movement is a lot more. It's flowing. And, you know, and it doesn't feel like intrusive and it doesn't feel like a living thing. So like when it moves on, it's less noticeable, and it's very smooth. And you know, not only that, but you know, I think like the journey between, you know, the soldiers, and just like experiencing war, and I guess there's like a really amazing shot, and you'll see it you'll know when you see it. It's set at nighttime, It's set in these kind of like blown up ruins. It's probably one of the best scenes, and I think for that alone, it's really worth the admission. And it keeps you engaged. That's what I was saying. It kind of does what Dunkirk failed at, because Dunkirk's whole thing was like, I'm gonna keep you engaged for like 2.5 hours of like being stressed out that, oh my god, they're gonna get off the beach. And they kind of did that really good with the sound design, always having like a clicking clock. But it didn't really work well for a lot of people. But I think this one, it does work well, because the camera doesn't cut, so then you're always there with the journey. And yeah, and even the music is really great. And you get these shots where they're walking in the trench, and I think legitimately they actually built like a trench, because like some of these scenes, like it takes them like 15 minutes to get one side to the other side, and to me, I didn't think there was any cuts. It just went full on straightforward. So I'd say 1917 definitely for the experience, and I think it's one of the best films that have come out this year. But yeah, that's 1917. I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is also a pretty damn good movie. I'd watch that. I'd say it's not Tarantino's best. But
I've heard the same thing, but I've heard it's really fun.
Yeah, it's really fun, and it's obviously his version of events that are in like Hollywood in that 1960s, 1970s period, because obviously a lot of things in what happened versus in real life did change.
Yeah, it's his own kind of like pulp version of things that happened back then.
Yeah, and I think with this film, it 100% is meta commentary upon meta commentary. In a sense of like, this is Tarantino commentary not only on Hollywood at the time, but also him
on his own work,
and his own work. For example, like even DiCaprio's character, he sees an agent, and he's just like, you're always seen as this person. You need a revitalization, and it's pretty much the same as something kind of like what happened to John Travolta, where it's like you're always seen as this particular person. You always get cast in these roles. So what happened with him in Pulp Fiction got recast as someone else differently, or even small things of because one of the suggestions is he works for Italian spaghetti western films. He's like, I hate those damn Italian spaghetti western films, and that's like kind of like a semi reference to like Django originally was made as an Italian spaghetti western, and it kind of blew up from there. So like there's all these little small nitty gritty references, but I think it's really good of I guess it's meta the movie, because there's even bits where like DiCaprio acts tough on screen, but in real life he's like he's a diva basically. He's like crying, he needs some help, and then his bodyguard / helper, played by Brad Pitt, is basically what he represents in the movies, but he does it in real life.
Isn't it Body Double?
Body double, but more or less he's just there all the time. Like they're best mates. They do everything kind of together.
Yeah.
So basically, it has that kind of duality of like he's doing what he's doing in the movies in real life, and how that kind of translates. So I feel like that's also a really solid good film, and I enjoyed it. And obviously, I don't really want to spoil much, but basically, I knew it was around the end of the movie. I'm like, okay, where's the action scene? Where's the bloody action scene?
I actually already know about this.
Yeah,
I already know.
Yeah, so because I was very curious. I'm like, okay, this is the first Tarantino film that nothing extremely violent has happened. So I was like, okay then. But yeah, solid movie. Aside from that, like, let's see, we got Parasite, which I think is a pretty good film.
Okay.
I think for me with Parasite is, like, I think I've probably watched a little bit more, I guess, world movies that I guess I'm not blown away, where it's like, oh my god, this international movie is taking everything by storm. Because essentially the story of Parasite, because I really didn't know much about going into it, because I literally thought it was a monster film, because Koreans and their and Japanese and their horror films.
I kind of knew it as like a film about like some guy starts working for like a rich family. Like that's more or less like what I kind of heard about it. But then like shit happens. Like
it follows the vein of shit does happen. It's a simple premise, but shit happens, where essentially a poor family finds a rich family, and they pretend to not know each other, and they're just like, this person does tutoring, and it's like this tutor's like, oh well, I actually know a maid, so then we'll hire the maid, and then essentially the whole family works for this one family works for another family, and they're pretending they don't know each other. So hence the name parasites, where they're kind of taking away, the rich is taking from the poor, but they don't know about it. And then obviously, no spoilers, but essentially shit does happen where there's a twist, but there's a twist upon twist, and it's basically just I'd say the main theme of this movie is like class warfare, essentially, where it's like how far people are going to go.
Yeah, I've actually heard the same thing. Yeah, I've heard the same thing from people reviewing it. Like, kind of like similarly to like how, like the Joker kind of touches on like a very similar kind of vein, and I think that's the reason why like a lot of people really like the Joker as well, because again, it does kind of touch on like the issues of the 1% and like the proletariats versus the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, it very much has that. But yeah, I was actually talking to one of my friends who knows a lot more about this stuff, and she was telling me it's like in Korea specifically, because the director's South Korean. He's like, it's a lot more significant in South Korea, where in South Korea you have uber rich families. And then you basically have a lower poor middle class, like pretty much, and then it's kind of like a very fight for their own. So that's why I think it hits more harder. I think for me, I didn't get as much of an impact on this film because because obviously the director, I forgot his name, it's Bong Jae-hoon, I think. He did Snowpiercer, which I really love, and a few other things. But there was another South Korean director that made another movie that was kind of similar to this, I guess in a different time period and a different type of thing. And he directed a movie that I really like called The Handmaiden. And it kind of has the same similar themes, where The Handmaiden is, I think, set in the late 1800s era. And basically this con artist goes to a family that is also poor and says, I'm going to trick this, they're all Korean. He's like, I'm going to trick this Japanese royalty basically to marry me so I can get all the money, and then you can get all the money for me and just pretend and basically make her fall in love with me. Hence the name Handmaiden, because the handmaiden makes the princess fall in love with the guy. So it's basically about stealing money as well. And that movie as well has, I guess, a lot of different twists as well, and I don't want to spoil that as well because I think that's a really great movie. But it's serious, like, kind of the same premise of kind of like tricking richer people, as well as different twists, because that film in and of itself has a twist upon a twist, much like Parasite does. So I think that's where the praise of Parasite comes from. If you wanted to know that.
Yeah. That's all good.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we've got Irishman, which I think is probably the most alienating film out of all of them. But I think if you like movies like Goodfellas and you do like majority of Martin Scorsese type films, this is basically a treat for you. But if you're not really in that type of genre, like you don't like Casino or like Raging Bull, kind of like these types of more slower films, then obviously it is a solid, great movie. But I think it would be very hard for people to be like, I'm going to commit like 3 hours of my life to this. Like even you said yourself, you have commitment issues with normal movies.
I think the thing is, like, I reckon I'll like it, but it's just about me starting and committing to what I think that's ultimately my kind of issue that I have to get over. We'll see. We'll just have to see. Like, I'll eventually make time to watch some.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like you could definitely.
What about Marriage Story? Have you seen Marriage Story?
Marriage Story. I have also seen. I think it has good takes, but I don't think I think it's overblown. That film. Obviously, I think the main reason why people talk about it is the performances. Obviously, Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver. Basically, Adam Driver is really solid actor, and he was literally the best actor in all of the new Star Wars films, so I think that's not debatable, pretty much. But yeah, essentially, Marriage Story is just a story about divorce and the brutal process of it. I guess the thing about it is that it doesn't really necessarily have 100% stance on kind of divorce or how things go. There are certain things that it does raise that I guess don't really get shown in most type of media. For example, like how I guess the lawyers push for more, even though, for example, one consenting party would just be like, I just want a clean divorce and we'll just share the kids. It kind of shows the semi-bad side of some lawyers where they're just take everything.
Take everything. Like, well, I mean, I've heard things about it with, like, like divorces and stuff, like, they'll be like, oh, well, if you claim like, your partner like abused you or something, like that's going to definitely guarantee, like, even if it's not true, like it's going to guarantee that you're going to be able to get full custody and stuff like that. So it is really interesting that they kind of have that component like in it to kind of show the, I guess, like the greedy kind of the greedy aspects of like our law.
Yeah, and they definitely they do show a point out of it, because like there's parts where like they're at they're a board meeting with all the lawyers, discussing the divorce, but then the lawyers are very nonchalant, like, oh yeah, you guys want like sandwiches, okay, cool, like they're very happy, like it's almost like it's like two different worlds where like these people's lives are falling apart and they don't really care. So I feel like it kind of has that. I think my whole negative thing between Marriage Story is that it doesn't necessarily have a 100% message. I would say it's kind of semi one-sided almost. I won't really give away really anything, but essentially, one person has to concede for the other person, just to make everything A-OK type of thing, and it doesn't really hammer that down more than I thought it would be, because I think this movie is basically just a cynical look at being like, this is probably pretty much as close as you can get to an accurate representation of what happens
during a divorce.
And it's not a easy, nice process. So I feel like Marriage Story really stands upon its acting 100%. But yeah,
cool,
and so that's basically a good solid rundown of kind of the films that the Oscar worthy, I'd suppose.
Yeah, sounds good. It gives me a lot of food for thought to.
And that's the thing. There are so many other movies that I guess aren't nominated for an Oscar that are still solid films, and even then, there's been a lot of movies that I haven't even watched yet that I heard that have been good, like Ford versus Ferrari. I heard that's pretty good. So
I've heard it's good, but I've heard it's good, but like I couldn't give two shits about rich people who've made cars and their kind of competition. Like, yeah, okay. Like, I get it. Like, I get how that does make a pretty interesting premise, but I couldn't give two shits about it.
I think that's me personally. I think it has that more competitive, like, ooh, like we're gonna compete type of thing.
Ooh, who will win, Ford or Ferrari? I guess they both do. Just saying.
That or even films like that isn't on your radar and it actually got snubbed from the Oscars is Uncut Gems. The Adam Sandler.
That's technically on my list as well. I just haven't seen it, but yes, I have heard about that being a snub too. It's a bit of a shame because I've heard good things, especially for Adam Sandler. You know what I mean?
Sometimes it is the comedians that can actually act really well. They just act funny on purpose. But yeah, Uncut Gems is just the story of I guess a guy who doesn't know to call it quits, where he owns a jewelry store. He earns a lot of money to like these mob people, but he always finds himself in situations where it's really like he just really crappy situations. And I feel like good performance by Adam Sandler, and I think a pretty good story overall. And I think like the last 20 minutes is really riveting because tension, guys. It's all about the tension, and you really feel for Adam Sandler's character. You just want him to get the best he can possibly get, even though he puts himself in really crappy situations. But yeah, that seems to be pretty much a rundown of all the award-winning movies, I guess, and we'll definitely see the results, what happened in like during the Oscars, and kind of our reveal of like what we think is the best. What we think is
good, yeah, because it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that will be us for this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and on our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill will be nominated for an Oscar one day. Let's hope so soon. So until next time, see ya.
Catch ya.